us because
I always do mine. I can't do it.
Welcome everybody to the City Council work session for Sierra Vista for the 26th of March 2019. We have everybody here, it looks like. Good. Sarah's, I'm sure she's probably on her way. We'll go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the 28th March council meeting agenda. And of course, we'll start that by calling to order. We do the roll call pledge and the invocation. Acceptance of the agenda. Is there anything on the agenda that people were anticipating that's not there or that should be there based on previous conversations? Item number 2 is an item where we're going to the mayor will reopen a public hearing that was tabled on March 14th about community development block grants. We'll have a discussion. Matt, have you got anything that you need to highlight to the council that since the last meeting?
Yes, we did receive an application from the Boys and Girls Club in the amount of $15,000 to fund after-school program scholarships. Apparently we crossed wires. They claim they submitted an application before the deadline. Didn't cross my desk, but we did accept an application, which is the same amount that was approved for funding last fiscal year. And so that would be added for your consideration on Thursday as to whether you want to approve their request in addition to the request from NAMI for $5,000 for.
And I've got some questions on those type of programs. If it's multiple year, aren't they supposed to be able to show an increase of 15%? Does that apply to the Boys and Girls Club where it's a scholarship thing?
It's a quantitative increase. In their application, they state that they were able to increase the number of youth served by 10%, as well as leverage the $15,000 that they received from the city to attract $15,000 in outside funding with more funding pending. So,
and have they demonstrated that in their application?
That's the claim that they made, and
yeah,
we'll send to back that up.
But again, that's something we need to see before we vote on it.
Okay.
And the other question with the 5,000, this is for a 1-year mental health issue or mental health assistance. And how does that apply when it's not a multiple year program? Normally, in a multiple year program, you're required to do a 15% increase, but
well, if it's a new service, that standard does not apply. So
okay,
it's either a new service or they have to show a quantitative increase from the previous year for an existing service.
Well, I think it's important for us to look at the quantitative increase to make sure we comply, because if we're found out of compliance, we get to pay back the money to the federal government, and I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I don't think anybody else wants to either. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Right now, we have the NAMI 5,000 coming out of administrative, which is 20,000. So it's coming out of that stack.
Right.
If we approve and add the 15 grand to the Boys and Girls Club, are we going to modify and move where we take the 5,000 out of, or that'll stay the same? We'll go somewhere else for that 15 grand.
Well, that's a consideration by council. We're proposing
okay.
deducting it in equal amounts across all city projects, but
okay.
You can take it more from one than the other.
And again, this is a public hearing, not a decision this time, right?
It's
no, you already, Mr. Mayor, you had the public hearing at the last meeting prior to tabling. I know you weren't there, but you could open it back up for public comment as well.
Well, there's an additional step. So this is a tentative selection stage. The projects and/or services that you recommend would be included in the draft annual action plan for 2019, which would also require a public hearing, and then a comment period following that hearing, and then it'll come back to you for final approval probably in June, July.
I guess what's confusing me is the way this is written here. It says the mayor reopens the public hearing. What normally would happen if we had something that had been tabled, I would ask somebody to bring the item forward and ask them if there's a motion to bring it off the table.
Yeah. That would
And
be
that's
the first.
that's what you're asking me to do, is to bring it off the table, or asking for a motion to bring it off the table.
Yes.
So somebody on the council would say, I move to take this item off the table for discussion or action, whatever the case may be, and we go from there. So the way this is written up is confusing to me.
Okay, but that, you just described the way that it should be.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay. All right, I'm still awake. Okay, any other discussion on item 2? Okay. Item 3 is thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Excuse me. Item 3 is the West Sierra Vista redevelopment program. Mr. McLaughlin.
Okay. Thank you. So the proposed amendments before you relate to the West Sierra Vista redevelopment plan, which are shown in strikeout and underline format. The changes broaden out the strategy to address the properties in the 29-acre expansion area that was approved on February 14th. You'll notice throughout the document there were changes to the data and maps to reflect the amended boundary. As you're all aware, revitalizing the West End is one of 6 objectives that we're pursuing through the Plan for Prosperity. It was also part of several former strategic plans and a topic of discussion at your last strategic plan retreat. So the base problem that we're trying to solve is bringing down the relatively high commercial vacancy rate through private sector interest and investment. The proposed amendments are aligned with the city's general plan, Vista 2030, as determined by the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's a goal in the plan to maintain, improve, and redevelop older areas in the community, promote infill development and reuse of vacant buildings. There are a number of strategies. I'll just read through them. They're in the plan. Identify properties offering redevelopment or infill opportunity, improving necessary infrastructure and redevelopment areas, continuing redevelopment needs and capital improvements planning, pursuing financial commitments from private entities for redevelopment projects, offering incentives for private development and redevelopment areas, seeking grants for redevelopment projects, identifying buildings and providing incentives for adaptive reuse projects, solving challenges associated with updating older buildings to current code compliance. So that's all in your general plan now, and we think is reinforced through the proposed amendments to the redevelopment plan. The amendments also reference the proposed improvements to North Garden Avenue, which are scheduled to coincide with the streetscape renovation to West Fry Boulevard. This furthers the general plan's goal relative to creating complete streets that encourages all modes of transportation. Further, the proposed conceptual master redevelopment framework identifies high priority revitalization sites. We would propose that the council consider increasing the amount of available grant funding to reactivate those properties. They're relatively high profile. They are showing signs of deterioration, and we think that they warrant a higher level of public intervention to return them to productive use. Also, you'll notice on the schedule of proposed investment through this redevelopment project, in addition to the funding that's already been slated for West Fry and North Garden Avenue and the funding for the West Sierra Vista Partnership Program, we've added a proposal to fund the development of a small business incubator. In the former plan, we illustrated what was called a Mercado concept, which would be an open air market, initially targeting the Sonoran businesses. They would operate from rented stands on leased space and offer their wares to the community. We've identified a couple parcels with an existing metal building that could fill that use on a longer term basis. So what we're showing in the plan is the first year acquiring the properties. There's a couple parcels with different owners. And then the second year rehabbing the existing building and to comply with codes for retail use, as well as constructing a parking lot. Now, Tony Boone has been driving this initiative, and he's researched some good examples from other communities that have undertaken a similar project, and he has information to share if you want to delve into this deeper.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the grant, you said you want us to increase the grant assistant amount? What?
Well, right now, we're just proposing the straight line 50,000 a year, but we're certainly, and of course, that's a decision by council on an annual basis, part of the budgeting process. However, if you want to project more or less, I mean, that's something we need to know as part of this, at this step in the process.
And my understanding is, Chuck, can you tell me if I'm off base here, is what we were looking at is obviously this fiscal year we've got money that's being spent. We'll have a remainder. We'll have a remainder. Now, are we talking? Is the proposal from the staff is an additional 50, or on top of what should be carried over, or the carryover bumped up to 50?
Well, the current policy would be a recommendation to carry the 50,000 as a budget item, and then add the carryover if there is any to next year's allocation.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, and remember, there are businesses that are waiting in the wings in the proposed expansion area to access this funding, so we may actually commit the available money in this year's budget towards those projects. So,
and if that occurs,
then
we need to let you know, and it may cause you to want to make a decision to increase the line item.
And the other issue in my mind is, I think the council pretty much set the policy that we want to continue, we want to expand the area. The thing that's being introduced here today, and maybe I missed it because I was at a different location the last time we talked about this. But my concern is the Mercado concept. I know we've discussed the Mercado concept. We've talked about that area, but this is the first time I'm hearing it. It's integrated together in one action. And my concern is trying to keep things clean. We obviously need to expand the area. I think the council agrees on that. We really haven't had any in-depth discussion about the Mercado, which I think is a good concept, but we need to know where our responsibilities are as landlords, who's owning property, what actually all the details about how we're going to bring renters and leasers and all those things in. And to me, these are two separate items rather than one run together.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would prefer also to not commingle that project in with the redevelopment area project. I think it should be handled and budgeted as a separate project.
I agree, and I think we're going to have some interesting discussions about what role government should be in actually getting involved in commerce, and whether we should have partners, and whose responsibility should be split between the government and the commercial interests, etc. And none of that has happened yet.
Well,
not on that one, no.
Not on that side.
And this doesn't commit you to even follow through on. I mean, it's just providing staff a direction to pursue.
Right.
And there would be subsequent meetings and discussion, obviously, in connection with the budget and authorization to proceed with the acquisition.
I hate to be picking you and laser focused here, but the redevelopment area, in my mind, is the first issue. The second issue is another item that isn't agendized today.
It's this is the revitalization strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you just giving that to us. This is an additional addendum to a potential revitalization strategy.
It's another.
That's why it's being presented today. It's not something for decision information. It needs to be developed.
Well, it's direction to staff whether it's warrants us to pursue.
Further work. Okay. So then the question is for council: do you think it's appropriate for me to have Tony come up and talk about that issue?
I agree with you. I think it should be a standalone item.
No, I would like to hear what Tony has to say,
I agree.
because I do understand where Matt's coming from, that this is the overall strategy we're looking at, and if we're making a decision on Thursday, if this is the direction we want staff to look at, then I think I would like to hear what Tony has to say about it.
Okay, but we're talking about a potential future issue that needs to be further discussed. As long as everybody understands that, I'm comfortable.
And I do understand that.
Okay.
I very much would appreciate if they were broken up, simply for the fact that since I do have a building that I could potentially be getting apparently increased funds, I feel really uncomfortable in that discussion and
Okay.
doing anything, so I'd excuse myself. However, the Mercado, I think, is a completely separate issue,
Separate.
and I do feel that I can
Okay.
put input.
And I see it as a strategy as part of the whole revitalization
Well,
plan.
sure.
It should
It's-
be,
it's a
it
piece.
should be included.
It's a piece.
As-
My concern is it's not agendized specifically. That's my concern.
But isn't it a part of the
Well,
West End revitalization?
well, so is the North Garden road improvements and the support to get the hotels in and those kind of things. So, I mean, how broad? It's just a matter of how broad you guys feel comfortable doing it. I don't have a problem with Tony standing up talking 5-10 minutes about it, but it's not really a decision for today on his piece of the pie.
I think it's important that we hear it, because if we decide after hearing what Tony says that we don't want him to pursue that strategy as part of the redevelopment plan, I think that's something they need to go ahead and
Okay.
know about, so they don't continue if we choose for them not to.
All right. Any objection to Tony talking about it?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Mr. Mayor, so just got a couple things. So one, the logic and thought, we've talked about the Mercado, and really this thing has kind of morphed over time, and we've kind of looked at it. So again, it was an inclusion. It has not been included in the budget for a final decision to the, for the final monies. But really this goes back to a quarter of the business license that we've seen are home-based businesses. So as a mechanism to bring home-based businesses out and give them an intermediate step kind of as they move forward. Again, we've talked about the vacancy rate in the West End. And again, and finally, as we move into the West End, development of a pipeline for businesses, small businesses, to have the opportunity to grow and move on. So those are kind of the baseline of why we went back. We've talked about the Mercado in the past. Just a couple of examples. As we've looked at it, Tianesta, Pennsylvania, with a very small population, they had a lot. They did a pop-up and they used shelters very similar to the original Mercado piece. And they had a wait list as they worked their way through it. Pascagoula, Mississippi, population 22,000, just to put it in perspective. 17 cottages and a very similar piece to take home-based businesses, give them the opportunity to see if there's a market, test new products in a relatively low-cost environment in a short period of time with the intent to grow them into brick-and-mortar businesses as they go forward. Montgomery, Alabama is a very interesting case study, but I'll keep it short. They ran a 5-year project downtown, a city-owned building. Began it in 2011, 2012. The intent of that was to activate a space, bring retail back to their downtown, and they actually saw a redevelopment surge in 2014, so about 2 years into the initial elements of the process. Roughly 9 businesses, and they ended it in 2017 as the businesses all graduated and moved into other brick and mortar. I will offer this, one of their key lessons learned at the end are the challenges of managing property from the city's perspective. Which is why one of the elements that we've talked about, and we haven't had a great opportunity to talk in detail, was to have a separate coordinator or project lead. So we may own the property, we may set the conditions, but the intent would be to have an intermediary run the facility, provide the rents and deal, and that's kind of what Montgomery found. The idea of us, or Mike Klein and I, trying to run that proposition. So that one was a good one, kind of as it laid out. Portland, Oregon considered it effectively to activate an old city building on their main port that was built back in 1922. So we've looked, there's a handful of folks, and there's some more that I could pull out, other case studies of other environments. There are different models. Cities have approached it in their entirety, such as Montgomery. Others have partnered with the likes of an IDA or a 501c3 EDF proposition. So there are some permutations that we can kind of work our way through. But the real intent behind it was to take, again, these home-based businesses, and we've looked at whether it's a virtual or a physical incubator, but again, to take those things out of their garages and give them a space to the tune of $400 or $500 a month, as opposed to a significant investment. The thought is, as we redevelop the West End, there's lots of small facilities, small buildings within that. And then the intent would be to have these folks in the system for 12 to 18 months in the pipeline so that they graduate and eventually go. What I can't tell you today is if we're like Montgomery, Alabama. If we're successful in 5 years, is this kind of an intermediate stage? The land that we're looking at, potentially the building, would have significant, they'll have a different value based on the redevelopment of Fry Boulevard. So I would offer that there is some investment. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, there's always the discussion about where does the government play, especially in commerce. But that is the logic and kind of our component to this proposition. It is something we have not done, and it's very kind of, quite frankly, we are attempting to control our own destiny and shape that environment in a very small way. But the intent is not to compete with other businesses or to compete in the commercial market.
It seems to me too, from some of the comments you've made, that from my experience in the readings I've done and some of the conversations I've been able to have, that without government getting involved, things move at a much slower pace. That's, we as a city government make a commitment to our community with the kinds of supports that he was just talking about, so it's important to us as a community as a government, to make an investment in the community this way. So I appreciate that you did that much research. I look back at that one I showed you in Gilbert, was it? Which is a permanent structure, but it was a place where small businesses started, and it became just a blooming, budding, blossoming, and it was a plural term there somewhere, blossoming activity in that community, and has really pulled people together in that community. So
Well,
Gilbert's really
and I would
important.
agree, it's time for us to instigate a few things. The question you didn't address is partnerships. I know EDF has a couple of incubator type operations going on. What are the opportunities for collaboration, support, etc. with EDF, or has that been explored yet?
That has not been explored. And Mr. Mayor, we really just kind of wanted to bring this up. Again, Mike and I have talked about it. We work with Matt to kind of open it up. And if the council says explore it and focus on the partnerships piece, we'll take that guidance and go back. I see two likely options, the IDA and the EDF. Okay. And depending on how we play it and how the partnership, there's a couple of examples that I saw that were public-private partnerships. The city owned the property and a business came in and effectively bid and took over and ran the operation. So we have some options here. It's not this or that. So I don't want you to think that.
Well, and that's before I make a decision, and I would appreciate if those type of options could be explored a little more in detail, and that would certainly make me feel more comfortable investing public funds.
Sir.
I just want to add too that one thing I think we need to really think about is that everything is not going to be 100% successful. That there's a place in here we have to take a chance. And I understand smart
we have to determine what the
investment.
acceptable risk is.
Smart,
that's
yeah.
part of my slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find it very exciting for us as a community to take a different step.
Economic gardening is amazing. I agree with you. The one thing you keep saying, incubator system. I think whoever we partner with needs to be able to place that, to give them lessons. Here's how you build that business plan to expand.
And
Here's how you go
EDF
back and
has
look
done
at
that
it.
with some companies
Right.
already. They've already got a couple
Exactly.
programs that do that.
So I like it.
The chamber has some programs.
Yes, ma'am.
Both chambers, yeah.
So, anybody else? Okay, thanks, Tony.
Thanks.
Any further discussion on the West End redevelopment area plan?
I do have an additional comment to make about the public's input. And I know you've already, that part of the plan includes public hearings on this. But I think it would be beneficial for us to have some kind of a gathering where we get some input from folks on the West End or the entire community, because this affects the entire community, to just hear what their vision is also. And with Matt showing what our vision is, at least to some degree, nothing in concrete, but just hear what ideas may be coming out of the community that we may not have yet considered. And also to attract those folks who may not realize what we're doing, what we're looking at, what the possibilities are, and who may have an interest in what we're doing for the West End revitalization. So as part of the plan, I think before we have a solid thing in place, which we never really do until after we have the public hearings, but the perception of the community is, oh, they've already got it figured out, they're they're gonna do this and they're gonna do that. Remember how they did about the streets, you know, before we even finished with the planning, it was, people didn't get it. So I truly believe we need to do more to get the public involved before we go much further with the full plan.
Any other discussion?
Where were you looking at? When you said possibly a building, possibly a lot. Is that?
Well, we're specifically looking at Mr. Parsons' property. So it's West End centric.
You need to explain where Mr.
Where is
Parsons
that?
is. North of Fry, it's
Well,
west of
yes, sir, I know.
Between,
I'd like to have a graphic and show you. The interesting part is we've
It's
talked
on our-
initially to the
It's on
Where the
landowner.
Mercado concept was illustrated.
Yeah, it's in the
where
same
Mercado
gap.
is on the map.
it's
Oh,
on
there.
Right.
across.
And then if you look to the north, you'll see the Horizons building. That entire
Horizon Movement.
complex has been for sale. So we've done some initial checking. We've talked to initial real estate agents. There's going to need to be some engineering work. There's going to need to be some surveying work. And that's why I was a little cautious about, we've spent time on it at this point, but I have not committed any of
Funds.
our funds to develop it, which is why we wanted to introduce it and have a discussion to see if council and the mayor were supportive in pursuing it. And we can work additional details, and the partnership piece is very important.
Yeah, and I think today's information is very preliminary, in my opinion. I don't have a problem with, once we have I won't say a plan, but a couple options, maybe going out to have a couple things with the West End merchants as well as with the chamber folks, and have a couple of public meetings so they understand what the concepts and why we're trying to do this. But again, this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow, and it's probably not going to be
The
budgeted.
next day, right?
It's probably not going to be budgeted in next year's budget, is my guess, is from what I'm hearing.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't think the concept, and I've been working with Tony and Mike, and they've put a lot of effort into it, but it's not developed yet to the point where I think we can have a real substantial discussion about it. In terms of budgeting, it is possible we could put a placeholder in and out in the budget if we need to, but I think we really need to explore working with either IDA or EDF because, we don't necessarily want to be the landowners, unless there's a portion of it that, could be used for public usage, like public parking or something like that.
Okay.
Just a quick question. All the properties along Fry are general commercial zoned. Have we thought about making them general commercial and residential? As an investor, I'd like to move in.
Yeah, so when I first came aboard, we revisited the zoning regulations.
Right.
And we added multifamily
Okay.
as a permitted use to the general commercial zoning
Okay.
district, whereas before it was
It
conditional.
was
so-
conditional. Okay.
So
Thank
we
you, sir.
could possibly have those kinds of structures that are stores on the bottom.
Mixed use.
That's exactly how it was done.
You could do either standalone multifamily or vertical mixed use.
I thought
Vertical
light industry was allowed in the West End
And
as
we
well.
extended,
That's what-
the
What was
district
that?
to
Light
industry.
include light industry on the side streets.
So like, if you wanted to make beer.
That's right. Who
Exactly.
would want to do that?
You know.
In terms of schedule, Mayor, I recommend that we proceed with the adoption of the plan, maybe do a
Yeah.
parallel process on the Mercado concept.
Yes,
to
I agree.
obtain community feedback on that.
I would agree. We'll deal with that on Thursday. Okay, any other further discussion? All good discussion.
When you said a parallel, what do you mean by that?
Well, if that is the item, because most of this is just statutory required information,
Set it
but
aside and deal with it separately.
if you want to set the business incubator concept aside and deal with that separately through a public involvement process, we'd be willing to do
Yeah.
that.
I think that makes sense.
Right.
'Cause I don't think we're not prepared to delay what we want to do for a public process on the other half of it
Okay.
at this time.
Okay.
I think we want to proceed and allow the other commercial opportunities to take place.
Right.
Okay?
Just have
Ma'am.
one other quick question. Matt, when you had talked about the possibly increasing funding, when do we need to make that kind of decision during the budget time?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
Yeah. You're not handcuffed to this
Yeah,
plan.
we know. We
No, 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 I understand.
No.
I just, I wanted
It's
to
a
make
proposal
sure that
right
we
now.
See additional funding.
Okay.
weren't skipping something we needed to talk about, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then, item number 4 is the regular meeting minutes. Any additions, deletions, completions, corrections, additions for the meeting minutes in the seeing none, we'll move on. Item number 5 is the mutual aid agreement for water, wastewater agencies. Ms. Flisar, excuse me.
On that, the minutes, we weren't here for the meeting, but even if we listened to it, we still don't vote on that.
It's really up to you. You can abstain, or you can vote yes or no, or whatever you want to do.
But not having been
Not
present.
if you read the minutes and you know, you can't testify that that's exactly what happened, so it's best for you to abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Ms. Flisar.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is another update to an agreement that we already have in place. Basically, this is an intergovernmental agreement with a variety of other agencies for emergency water and wastewater response. It's not an agreement we've ever had to activate. It is not an agreement we've ever had to respond to as of yet. But it provides a mechanism in the event of a large-scale emergency that we would be able to get assistance from other communities, or we would be able to provide that assistance to others. As part of their ongoing process, the agency is updating their agreement, and one of the things that was a big criticism of the last agreement is that it didn't allow for private entities. As you know, all our water companies here in town are privately owned. Under the old structure, those agencies weren't part of the agreement. The only ones that could participate were municipalities. So that has been updated. That is the big change in the agreement. Everything else is substantially the same. So it's essentially the same agreement that we've been part of for the last few years. Be happy to answer any questions.
Are our 3 primary water companies signatories to this, or is it worth our while to make them aware of it and bring them on board?
Mr. Mayor, to the best of my knowledge, they are not signatories right now, but we can certainly reach out to them and let them know that they're now eligible for this.
Well, I think that would be important because they may see some benefit, and of course that would help the general public as well.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions? Further discussion? And that ends the item A for the council meeting agenda. We're lucky today to have a presentation by the area agency on aging. Ms. Laura Villa is here to talk to us, and I've told her she's got 15 minutes and we got 5 minutes worth of questions. So, and she's got a lot of slides, so watch her go fast. And Laura, we really appreciate you being here. And the Area Agency on Aging has done a lot of good things in the 4-county area that CEGO serves, and we appreciate everything you do for our aging population, since some of us fit that category.
Thank you so much for your invitation. I really do appreciate it, Mayor and council members. I'll cover as much as I can in the time that I have allowed. As you know, we have 8 regions in Arizona itself, and we are region number 6, which covers Cochise, Grand Rainy, and Santa Cruz, out of the 622 area agencies on aging throughout the United States. So there is a map. That's what the areas that we cover. The Area Agency on Aging is an organization designated by the State Union of Aging. Now, we are under the umbrella of Southeastern Arizona Government's Organization, or CEGO. We are a separate entity, the Area Agency on Aging, which is pretty much on its own based on the funding that we get from the Older Americans Act from the federal government. So all the funding that we get from the federal government and state funds, it is allocated back into our communities for different services that I will be discussing shortly. We are the advocates and planners of services for individuals who are 60 and older, and also individuals with disabilities and family caregivers as well. We serve, as mentioned, 60 and over, people with disabilities, family caregivers, people in nursing homes or assisted living facilities. We have programs of ombudsman volunteers and ombudsman staff that go into those facilities to check up on clients in those areas. We also help all of our Medicare beneficiaries. How we work, we coordinate, basically we use we maximize the funds by weighing local funds as well as to support the service system. So basically we ask of all of our providers or subcontracted agents to be able to put a match towards the funding that they're receiving from the federal government and the state. And so that is how we are able to provide more services in the different communities. We minimize service duplication, meaning that if we have somebody that is receiving long-term care services, then they wouldn't be under the Area Agency on Aging Group Services, because that would be duplicating services for the same type of reasons. We are designated geographic areas of providers. We have 19 different providers throughout the 4-county region. In Cochise County only, we have 2 service providers that offer home and community-based services. We have 2 or 3, I think it's 2, transportation service providers and so forth. We have case managers throughout the region. In Cochise County alone, we have 4 case managers. We have one that oversees Sierra Vista only. We have another one that covers the Benson area, Wilcox area, another in Bisbee and Douglas as well. So they're spread out to be able to cover the whole geographic area. Partnerships and cooperative alliances is the most important thing for our area agency. Without partnerships, we wouldn't be able to do any of what we do. Our staff is very minimal, and you'll be able to see that. So it wouldn't be possible to do all of the education and outreach that is being performed in the 4-county region. We develop services and programs. We seek public, private foundation, and individual financial support. Just recently, we applied for a grant to continue our efforts in advanced care planning, and we received $140,000 for that program to continue, not just in Cochise County and Eastern Santa Cruz, but also to be able to expand it to our 4-county region. Wow. And I apologize for the misspelling there. My staff got a little excited, I guess. This is the annual data from fiscal year 18, and this is the 4-county region. But I will share with you the numbers for just Cochise County, and we have already touched 37,556 individuals just in Cochise County only. Yes.
I just have to ask. You said you had 4 case managers
in Cochise County only.
Oh.
We have a total of 7 case managers throughout the 4-county region.
Okay, but the 7,000, no, that's ours, individuals.
Okay.
700. Do they all get case management?
So let me get there.
Okay.
So we've helped 37,000 individuals in Cochise County, and they're broken down by meals, for example, is 84,000, home delivered meals and congregate meals, 7,384 hours of case management. Hours, that's hours. Okay. And 100,000 plus hours of home and community-based services, meaning that is the time that we spend with our clients, providing them case management support and services. And 727 individuals utilizing the benefits counseling, meaning Medicare, SHIP, state health insurance program that helps Medicare beneficiaries to know what their best plans are throughout the year, to be able to allow them to save money, to be able to purchase their food and not have to spend it in medications per se. 100,000, over 100,000 in transportation trips, and 15 complaints handled by the ombudsman program in assisted living facilities.
Where do you do your congregate feeding?
Currently in Cochise County, we have a contract with Tombstone. The Senior Center in Tombstone. We have Dark in Douglas. We have Dark and Tombstone. For congregate, that's it right now.
No congregate feeding in Sierra Vista?
No, no, nothing in Sierra Vista. The last contract we had with Catholic Community Services closed last year, and that was because of lack of participation. Okay. One of the reasons that must have been is because of the Salvation Army that opened their doors. Okay. And so that is a huge thing that we're addressing right now. So this is only for Sierra Vista. So these are your numbers for Sierra Vista. 451 people, 23,000 meals, 5,292 hours of case management, 21,192 hours of home community services, over 4,000 of transportation.
What does it mean, one-way trips?
So we count it as just 2, and then when they come back to where they initially started, that's another trip.
Oh.
So it's go and then come back, 2 separate
Two
trips.
separate trips. I thought you dropped them off somewhere.
No, unless they didn't want to come back for some reason. Okay, and these are all the services that the Area Agency on Aging covers: case management, congregate meals, information and referral. Some of these are in-house programs, some of which are, subcontracted out, like, for example, home delivery meals, community-based services, the respite services, transportation, what else here? Legal services, but all the others are handled within our office. So there is a group of 5 individuals, including myself, and we're in 4 counties providing information referral, Medicare benefits counseling, the Ombudsman program, volunteering, health and wellness, community education, advocacy, and also advanced care planning. So we're really busy, but we couldn't do this without the help of all of our volunteers. We started from maybe about 3 volunteers 4 to 5 years ago when I started. We're up to 14 volunteers, which is great. And so we really have been very successful in doing all of what we're doing because of our volunteers and our partner system. So just as we wouldn't be able to function and do any of the services that we do without an advisory council on aging. And currently, there is only 2 positions that are vacant, and they're not in Cochise County. And all of the different members of a council bring ideas, issues, and concerns about their respective areas, and they help us by disseminating the information that we have in the different communities. And they advocate for their community elders and disabled individuals as well. We do have 8 seats for Cochise County, 4 seats for Graham, and 3 for Santa Cruz and Greeley counties as well. And those are our members. So some of them you might know, some of them you might not. But they're really out there. They bring a lot of great ideas, a lot of great support to our programs, and we're really happy to have them on board. So this is our. We are under, like I said, SEGO, and Randy Heights is our director. But yet, this is all of the people in our office that are there to answer any questions that you might have. Or if you have any people that you want to refer to us, please do so. Here are our numbers. You can connect with us, and if we don't call you right back because we're on the road, you can leave us a message, and for sure in 24 hours we'll get back to you. So our mission is that we provide services that empower individuals' choice, independence, and dignity for our aging and disabled population and their caregivers. And our vision is to create age-friendly communities in southeastern Arizona that encourage and support individuals to live with dignity and choice. And in your packets, I didn't bring any for any of you, but I'm sure that you saw it. You'll be able to see all the flyers of the different activities that we have coming up. We have Tai Chi. We just started Tai Chi in Sierra Vista, and our upcoming class will be April 1st. We have a couple of wonderful volunteers that are doing that for us. We have Matter of Balance. It's coming to Benson, so we're starting a class on April 9th. We also have thoughtful life conversations going throughout the Cochise County. We have one coming up in Bowie and a Train the Trainer in Wilcox. And also, we're planning on doing the National Healthcare Decisions Day. That's coming up in April. And this is a 2-hour session free for the public with the gracious funds of the Legacy Foundation and their support. We're going to be able to do this first time we've ever done it here in Cochise County. We'll be having Dr. Andrew Lackman. He's palliative care and internal medicine, attorney at law Paul Mello, and of course I'll be presenting. I couldn't get out of it. And so we will also be doing the Train the Trainer, like I mentioned, in Wilcox. And please, if you have the time in June and would like to be with us at the conference on aging, this is our 5th year. We're really excited about it. We are bringing Sandy Markwood, who is our CEO for the National Associations of Area Agency on Aging. and she's coming to Sierra Vista. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you. That was a great briefing of questions for Laura.
One, were you pointing at me? How many, do you deliver meals in Sierra Vista?
We do.
And do you know about how many?
At the top of my head, without going back to the...
20.
Did it say?
20,000 and some change.
Delivery?
Yeah.
Well, it was
Oh, but
delivery
that's per
slash
year.
congregate, yeah.
That's
Okay, so
For the
this
year.
is meals, includes home delivered meals. In Sierra Vista, 23,000 meals. We do contract with Catholic Community Services and also Mom's Meals. So for those of you that don't know Mom's Meals, it's an agency that is out of Idaho, and they provide meals in this area. They even have a car now that they deliver the meals. So before, we used to have them deliver them in via FedEx, and they deliver 10 meals. They're frozen meals. And you know, you just pick out the meals as you're eating them. And so those are the only two providers that we have currently. We are going through RFAs. We are in the process of that. So new fiscal year in July, we start with new RFAs. Hopefully there's other vendors, but for right now, those are the two that we have.
So that 23,000 represents one meal a day
Yes.
for quite a few clients?
Correct. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how many people that would be. I'm not that great at math. But yeah, those are the meals that we serve for 2018. Please come look at us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. That was very informative. We really appreciate what you do for our community.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. We'll next move on to item C, Pavement Condition Index Survey.
It's me.
Sharon, how exciting.
Yes. Everyone loves to hear about pavement, right? Let me go grab them.
We do.
That and sewage.
That's how my
Yeah,
car
sewage.
was a minute ago.
Refuse.
Refuse is even more fun.
Yeah, I get all the good ones. All right, despite the topic, we'll keep this as light as possible. So I am here to talk with you about pavement today. Where this comes from, this is the current City Council strategic objective. Basically, develop a road condition assessment and develop a comprehensive pavement maintenance plan. So as we're coming up to the end of the 2-year strategic plan, it's time to report back to Council on the progress we've made in that in the last 2 years. So basically where we've been. The way we've always evaluated pavement in the past is through visual assessment. We send an employee out, take a look at the pavement. Obviously this is kind of fill-in work with all the other things we do, with weeds, with traffic signals. So one of the challenges was just getting someone out there consistently to take a look at the pavement and make some sort of a condition assessment. Oftentimes that ended up not being the same person. So if you send 2 different people out, they're going to have 2 different impressions on the condition of that pavement. So that was a challenge as well. And then the last thing was looking at the surface only. You can't see what's under the surface of the pavement. And sometimes that's what's most important. It can indicate problems that are getting ready to crop up. But if you're just relying on a visual assessment, that's all you have to go on, is the surface. So one of the things we've done over the last 2 years is we did an automated analysis. Funding for this came through the Sierra Vista Metropolitan Planning Organization. It was about $150,000, which sounds like a lot, but when you consider the time for one employee to visit every street in the city, to record data, to compile that data, and reconcile that data, the funding we got through the Sierra Vista MPO for an automated assessment was well worth the money. Some of the advantages of that is it was done through a radar system. So now instead of just looking at the surface, you're looking at what is under the surface as well and making a better assessment of the condition of the pavement. The other thing is the entire city was done in just a few days. It looks like a little trailer that's pulled behind a van, and they were able to do all of that in the span of just a few days, cover the entire city. And then obviously it provides consistent measurements. So instead of multiple people looking at it and coming up with something different, this is all based on algorithms and analysis. And at the end of it, they provided us an amazing spreadsheet that detailed condition of pavement citywide. Quite frankly, more data than we ever would have known to ask for on the condition of our street system. It really is a very, very impressive result to get from this. And since we have gotten this, we've shared it with Cochise County. Cochise County is now undertaking the same effort themselves. I've also gotten a call from the town of Marana, who is going through the similar process and had been referred to us to talk about the results we got out of it, and they are also now looking at the same thing. So we're already getting great information out of that, and looking forward to what we're going to be able to get out of it in the future. Two important terms for me to talk about real quick, because I'm going to mention them a lot. Pavement Condition Index, or PCI, that's kind of the preeminent term that's used when we talk about pavement condition to describe it. It's a number between 1 and 100. 1 being the worst possible shape, practically turning to dirt, probably already is dirt if it's a 1, all the way up to 100, pristine, not a single problem with it. For excellent pavements, they're going to be typically 80, 85 and above. And I have another chart here I'll show you that breaks down the different categories. But just so you know, when you hear me say PCI, that's what I'm talking about. And then another term we use a lot is called backlog. Backlog is those roads that are classified as poor or very poor. It is related to PCI. It is a PCI of less than 40, which sounds really bad. It's not actually quite as bad as you would think. It just means that those roadways are showing serious signs of distress, have a lot of cracking showing up, and are approaching needing replacement. At a backlog type condition, the roadway is probably not going to benefit too much from like a chip seal. But I'll talk about that a little more as I get going. So here's a few key findings that came out of the analysis. So our average PCI is a 64. National average, 60 to 65. So we are right in there on the high side of average. I'll skip down. Percent of poor or very poor, we're at a little over 6%. National average, 12 to 15. So again, we're doing pretty well on the backlog condition. Now, unfortunately, we are also a little bit low on percent of excellent. We're at about 8.6%, and the national average is 15. That means more of our roads tend to cluster in the middle. We don't have as many at either extreme. We're more in the middle. Not sure that's a bad place to be. This breaks down the roadways by both condition and the type of roadway. Arterial are our biggest roads, like Fry Boulevard, 7th Street, Wilcox. Minor arterial, obviously a little smaller than that. Collector, usually those are more major roads in neighborhoods, think like Foothills Drive, and then obviously your local streets. So a few takeaways from this. Our arterials are actually in really good shape. PCI is 74, which puts us in the very good range. How did we end up here? Primarily a few years ago, about 5 years ago, we were able to get grant funding to do what's called the mill and fill, an overlay, on some of our biggest roadways. Fry Boulevard, Wilcox, and 7th Street, to name a few. That's a big part of the reason why you see the arterials here at a 74. Minor arterials also not looking so bad. We're at a 70 on those. And then collectors and locals, they're a little bit lower. They're at about 60 to 62. This isn't necessarily unexpected. When you look at our biggest neighborhoods, the PDS neighborhood, Village Meadows, it's hard to believe, but those neighborhoods are over 30 years old now. So that pavement has done its job over the years, but is in need of a little TLC at this point in time. may not realize too, but when you think about it, absolutely the case. Canyon de Flores, the oldest streets in Canyon de Flores are now 20 years old. They were built in the early 2000s. So even a subdivision that we would say is new is actually 20 years old. And Canyon de Flores was completely built out by 10 years ago. So we're starting to see the roads there in need of some more intensive maintenance as well. But again, none of this surprised me about how these shook out. So in terms of where we go from here on rehabilitation, as part of the spreadsheet they gave us, the consultant prepared a 5-year prioritized plan. Important to realize, budget is an input variable in this spreadsheet. So basically you plug in how much money you have to spend and it spits back out the roadways that you should be doing that year. Pretty slick. But I don't want you to think that, you know, budget is predetermined in all of this. It's not. I'll show you a slide in a minute that shows the impact of different budget levels, but budget is an input variable in the spreadsheet. Options range from do nothing to fix all. I'm not sure either end of that spectrum is really the best way to go. Do nothing is fortunately not an option that the city has had to confront. I think maybe 1 year in the past 20, we've been in a situation where HERF was swept and there were, you know, no other options available, and we had to look at the do nothing option for 1 year. At the same time, fix all, basically eliminate the entire backlog and bring everything up to very good or excellent standards. That's just going to be cost prohibitive for most communities. So the range of realistic options is going to be somewhere in between those. Obviously the budget implications are going to vary significantly depending on which budget we end up with. And then also just briefly, PCI versus backlog control. Without getting too far into the weeds, these are two different methodologies to control the condition of pavement. As I mentioned early on, PCI and backlog are related, so they're kind of two different sides of the same coin. But briefly, when you're looking at backlog control, what you would be doing is trying to address those roadways that are at the tipping point and have fallen below the tipping point, trying to address those that are at the very lowest end of the spectrum. PCI, you're going for the overall average. So you may get to more roads that are higher up and sacrifice a little bit on your backlog. So just very briefly here on maintenance strategies, what's off to the right is what we know is like pavement condition curve, and basically what this demonstrates is that a little bit of money spent when a roadway is in relatively good condition on a relatively cheap strategy such as crack sealing will restore it to close to its brand new condition. However, as you get further along down that curve, you have to spend more money to bring it back up to its almost new condition. And those treatments are going to obviously be more expensive. They're going to be more in depth. So, you know, a little bit of money spent up front is the best way to go, but that's not always possible. As you probably got the sense of from the results, every community has backlog. I don't know of any that don't have backlog. That's always going to be something you have to deal with. But this is just something to keep in mind. It's why we focus a lot of efforts on crack sealing, why you see those crews out there this time of year. We're trying to keep the roadways as high as possible and ideally not slip below the tipping point where we have to get into a complete reconstruction. But usually the most intensive, or sorry, the least intensive maintenance strategy is crack seal. That's the rubberized material that we spray in the cracks of the roadway that prevents water from getting down into the base of the roadway and causing potholes and other issues. The next step above that is a slurry seal, which simplistic way to think of it would be like a crack seal over the entire road. A seal coat that goes over the whole thing and helps to fill some more of those gaps. Then we have a chip seal. It's a pretty familiar term. We do a lot of chip seals. Next step after that would be an overlay, which is just adding pavement on top of the existing pavement. Mill and fill, closely related, but that's where you take the top layer of pavement off, you grind it off, and put new asphalt on top so it matches the curb lines on either side. And then, like we did on Avenida Cochise here recently, Avenida Cochise, east of 92, a full reconstruction. You get into a full reconstruction where, frankly, the pavement's just so far gone, the other options aren't realistic. It is the most costly of the options, but sometimes necessary based on the condition of the pavement. So this is where we start getting into budget a little bit and talking about the impacts of budget. The blue line, just so no one freaks out too bad, that's the fix-all line. That comes in at a whopping, I think it's just shy of $70 million. I think we can all acknowledge together that's not really feasible, but it does give you an idea on the value of the asset we're talking about here. Pavement is one of the largest assets the city owns, is our pavement inventory. So that one may be realistic, so let's look below that. The black line down at the bottom is the do-nothing option. And although this, looks bad, when you really stop to think about it, our existing PCI is at a 64, and basically what this is telling you is if we were to do nothing, the average PCI in 5 years would drop by about 10. So, okay, it's bad, it's not as bad as it could be. All other options fall in between. Different kinds of control, backlog versus PCI. The green line you see on there is roughly equivalent to the city's current budgeting level, about $1 million a year. So that's where we are. Now keep in mind, before anyone freaks out too bad, that is without any other infusion of money. That does not consider grants, like we've gotten in the past for our arterial roadways. It doesn't consider any increased funding. That is just steady state, about $1 million a year. That also doesn't consider any new technologies that may come out, better ways of doing things. So that's roughly where we're looking at the consultant's best approximation of what we could do and the position we'd be in at the end with different maintenance strategies and funding levels. So after that slide, which I could see how that would potentially be a little disconcerting, how do we stretch taxpayer dollars? There's a variety of ways we do that. Take the money you give us and make it go as far as possible. One thing we started doing a couple years ago is we cluster work in neighborhoods. So instead of doing a street here, one over here, one in this neighborhood, two in this neighborhood, we try to hit entire neighborhoods at one time. That works well for a variety of reasons. One, we get better pricing from contractors if they don't have to move as much, if they can just stay in that neighborhood. If all their traffic control is in that area, we get better pricing. Also, we tend to get less phone calls from citizens this way. We used to get a lot under the old system where they'd be like, my neighbor's road's being redone, mine's not much worse than that. Why isn't my road being redone? Well, your road's on the list for next year. I gotta wait an entire year? Yeah, unfortunately. So we figured out there was a better way to do that. And also clustering work in neighborhoods helps to maintain a cohesive look of the neighborhood. You don't have a brand new street over here and one that's seen better days over here. It makes it look consistent. We also use economies of scale. What that means is clustering projects together. We don't send out a small amount of one type of project. You're going to get higher bid prices when you do that. So we cluster like work together and try to, even if that means moving something to a different year, if it's not at the tipping point yet, that's a good strategy to get better pricing and stretch those dollars further. We're always looking at new technologies. This stuff is literally coming out almost every day. People are experimenting, doing new things with adhesives, with binders. So our street supervisors and our engineers are always looking at new products that are on the market and seeing how they can be of use to us. We watch for the tipping point of the roadways. As much as we can minimize reconstruction, that helps save the city money. And then also being realistic about the strategy. Chip seals are great, they're relatively low cost, but if the roadway is falling apart with tons of potholes, throwing a chip seal on top of it isn't going to do a great deal of good. The average life of a chip seal should be about 7 years. If you throw it on top of a roadway that's already badly deteriorated, it's going to fall apart within months. That was a bad financial investment on our part. So, looking forward, this is this year's annual street maintenance project list. So you can see the St. Andrews neighborhood is one of them. And over on the west side of town, we just opened bids last week on the crack sealing and patching portion of this year's annual street maintenance. Chip sealing will follow. That may push into next fiscal year because we have had an urgent issue come up over on First Street with a trench situation over there that we're going to have to address. But these are the roads that we currently have scheduled, and we should be able to get that contract awarded within the next few weeks and get started. So within the next few weeks, people in these neighborhoods are going to see construction crews mobilize and see crack sealing and patching in advance of some chip seals coming up. Future tasks, where we're going with the information we have. We started inputting the information into the GIS system. The map you see there, there's numbers on that map. Those are the PCI ratings of the various streets. So that's going into the GIS system as we speak. That's going to take a while. We have over 2,000 of them to put in there. So it's going to take a while, but we are inputting all those in. It's our goal to update GIS on an annual basis based on the work we do each year, because if we're not keeping GIS updated, then that information is quickly going to become out of date. And we also need to update our spreadsheet continually so that when we input the budget number for the next year and run it, it will give us the right roadways and not ones that we've already done. Continue to evaluate new technologies, and then also we will need to update the pavement condition assessment every few years. As many updates as we make in GIS and use that process, it's still going to be a good idea to have the company come back down, rerun the roadways, because that is going to reprioritize things. So that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sharon, that was an excellent briefing, very thorough.
Yes, it was.
And we appreciate that. The question I'm going to ask, what I probably shouldn't, which is a budget question for next year,
I'm prepared to do that. Go back to your lines.
Go back to the lines.
The real question is,
Depressing lines.
the real question is, realistically, how much more, if we had the money, big if, how much more could we do for the next year versus this year? That's really my question.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, first thing, we need to do besides getting the GIS system together, because that's going to tell us, more about our clustering strategies and, and the types of treatment the streets need. But if you look at those lines, Sharon mentioned we're at the green line there, and we should at least be at that orange line, and more preferably the dotted blue line would be the better place to be. So, my next question to her is going to be, well, we're at this million or so level right now. HERF is doing a little better. Maybe we'll be able to do a little better in terms of, budget numbers going forward. But what's the delta between the green line and those other two lines, which would be a more preferable place to be? you know, off the top of my head, it looks like $500,000, but I need
It's
her-
more than that.
Yeah.
It's about two and a
I was
half.
gonna say,
Well,
at least two.
Yeah,
well,
$2.5
$1 million, and so I'm not an engineer, but.
No,
Or
the
a math guy.
delta, the delta.
You know,
The green line is at about $1 million a year. The dash purple blue line is figure around 3.5 million. So the delta is about 2.5. Again, that's contingent on strategy, though. We can
Yeah,
do
but that-
different strategies.
That's not gonna be a realistic number,
Yeah.
so, you know, we gotta figure out how to get you, you know, or some sort of strategy to get you an extra $500,000 to $1 million, probably a year.
I would agree.
And so, once we figure out what that is and what streets we can do with that, then I think we can come back and start bringing finance options and budget options to you in terms of how we can do that. You know, as you know, the problem over the past number of years has been HERF. HERF is a declining revenue
Overall.
source, even though it's going up as cars are made more fuel efficient. You have less and less gas tax dollars going into the pot. There doesn't seem to be much of an appetite to raise gas taxes or anything like that. So we've been forced over the past number of years to start using general fund sales tax dollars to augment our HERF dollars to do that. Of course, that takes away from other priorities like public safety and that kind of thing. So, you know, if we could find some sort of a dedicated funding source, or, you know, let's say we pay off these bonds here that's scheduled to be paid off in 2 years, council may want to consider dedicating a portion of those savings to street maintenance in an effort to try and do a better job. We can't keep going down the green line.
Okay.
We can't. You know, we do that, that's going to be very expensive, and that would not be a good legacy to leave to those that follow us.
When we have a utility company bust up the roads to run new, it happened on the west end. The gas
Gas
lines,
lines.
yeah, they decided not to go through the alleyway and instead cut up the street. And I know they filled it, but
But not well.
there was a ripple effect to what they were doing. Do we get any funding to help when we do go to?
Short
Fix those up.
answer is yes.
Okay.
We do get some. And just so you know, we have changed our permitting process based on that experience.
Thank you.
So we have made some changes looking forward so that kind of thing doesn't happen again. I don't think any of us were real pleased with the
It was
results
bad.
we ended up with there. But we do have franchise agreements with many of the utilities, and the SSVEC one in particular. In years when HERF was struggling, that was our source and our only source for annual street maintenance. So we do get some funding there to help with the condition of the roadways as well.
So the Southwest, in this case, does Southwest Gas give money?
I'm not sure on the Southwest Gas franchise.
David,
agreement.
Southwest Gas gives a franchise payment, however, that does go into the general fund. They also, Southwest Gas also has a right, if we ask them to move a gas line, to be reimbursed from those franchise fees for that move. So like when we did Coronado widening, a chunk of that franchise tax went back to them in reimbursement for moving the gas line out from under roadway, which is nice short term, expensive short term, but as just live on the west end, certainly good long term.
Yeah, I realize it may not be a lot of money, but isn't there a way, rather than it going into the general fund, that it could go into a pot especially for streets? Or into
You could move it to there, but based off the PSPRS increases and the class comp plan, 2 years ago, these $700,000 from the SSVEC franchise started to remain in the general fund to cover those. And then we were supplementing the HERF money from the capital improvements fund for the capital maintenance. Last year, some of the projects did not get done, so the $700,000 carried over to this year, which is on the current year budget. There is no transfer from capital improvements fund to HERF. But if council could decide to dedicate all of the franchise fee money or some portion of it to the HERF fund, understanding that something in the general fund will have to give to make up for that lost revenue.
And Councilmember Calhoun, this is where you guys earn your big bucks. Without big increases of revenue with regards to improving economic conditions or tax increases, heaven forbid, the squeeze is on, and the choices between street maintenance, which is a very expensive proposition, and other projects, particularly in the area of economic development, those kind of things become more difficult. So the priorities that you said are going to be very important with regards to the budget and what happens when we pay off the bonds in a couple of years, which will free up some funds. We're going to be bringing, ironically, another project to you this work session, which hopefully will help us with gain some of those goals here in a little bit.
Excuse me. Well, not to be argumentative, but the comment that there doesn't seem to be much people really wanting to increase gas taxes. Has there been some study done recently that shows people do not want to increase gas taxes?
When I think when Chuck said people, he's specifically talking about elected officials in the legislature.
Oh, those
another
people.
effort made to raise the gas tax, and it's not.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Those be the people we send
Those
to
be the
Phoenix.
people, yeah. Okay.
All right, Will?
Just a quick question, and I'm going to ask Matt too, because I might have read it wrong. For the West End redevelopment plan, you have HERF funds going to that project. Is that a percentage of the HERF funds we're getting?
To the
did I read it
North
wrong?
Garden project?
Roger.
No, those are Sierra Vista MPO funds
Okay.
coming from the
Then I
federal
read it wrong.
government.
They were swapped with the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the HERF.
I just wanted to
swap,
make
yeah.
sure. Okay, thank you.
To understand the HERF fund, to make it easy for all the people, staff, and everyone else, we take all street-related projects and put them in the HERF fund. We have HERF revenue, which is restricted, which is why the fund exists, which can be used to build and maintain streets only.
Gotcha.
When we were getting the ARA grants to reconstruct Fry Boulevard and 7th Street, since those are street grants, we put them in the HERF fund as well.
Gotcha.
We put the HERF swap into that because, again, we're building and maintaining and redoing a street. So any street-related grants, funding of any sort, we include in the HERF fund. It makes it easiest to account for and track how that goes. And it certainly takes a lot of load off the work of Sharon's people trying to figure out where they pay this invoice from.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Anything else on this subject? Again, a very good briefing, a lot of things to think about, and a lot of budget implications. Next, we go on to the item D, discussion of energy savings project financing options. David.
Does anyone need a handout? I did extras.
Thank you.
I'll try to be quick. I'm also going over a little bit of extra because only one person really has been here during bond issues. I don't remember if Councilman Gray was here in a complete bond issue, but I don't think so. So first, let me back up. How we've discussed the Schneider project. So there'd be two ways we'd be looking at paying for whatever council decides to do. It would either be a municipal property corporation bond issue or conventional financing. The break-even point for the two financing methods is $5 to $6 million. Under $5 to $6 million, the issuance costs outweigh the interest savings you'll get. You actually save money by doing a conventional financing. Over $5-6 million, the lower interest rate overcomes the bond issuance costs, so it's better financially to do a bond issue. Now, for those of you new, the Sierra Vista Municipal Property Corporation is a legal corporation in the state of Arizona. It's a part of the city, however, it has an independently done board. It issues what are called municipal facility revenue bonds. These are not property tax bonds. The pledge is from the city's sales tax. Council leases ground to the MPC, it builds stuff, leases it back to us, and we make payments on it. That's the normal process for it. Therefore, there is no property tax lien on the constituents. There is no public vote needed to do these.
I just want to make a point. When you say there is no public vote of the populace, there is a public vote of the
board.
council.
Right. Understand the reason for a general obligation vote to the public is they are not voting on the project. It's really key you understand that. They're not voting on whether to build something. They're voting to have their property taxes paid for it. They do an MPC issue. There's no vote. No homeowners on the hook for their property taxes being leaned for this. It's a pledge of our sales tax. We have current MPC bonds outstanding. We recently refinanced some, the ones that Chuck had mentioned in regards to paying off here in a couple of years. Part of that covenant is we have to have what's called a coverage ratio, which is basically your pledged revenues divided by next year's debt service. Our bond covenant requires a 4 times. In other words, our excise taxes must be 4 times the debt service. Our financial policy that was approved by the council has a 6 times. That's included on here. That's something we always look at when we're dealing with these to make sure we've got a comfortable coverage ratio in case of any economic downturn like we went through, that we won't be in bond default or policy default if the taxes fall below anything. So that's kind of the highlight of the MPC bonds and how they come about and how they're done. Next few slides are just a reminder of these 4 options. Option A is the whole enchilada, everything included. Option B is taking out and only doing one of the ball fields for turf and one of the lighting projects. Option C just removes the wave machine. And option D is just the energy saving projects. Now these numbers have been updated from the original presentation slightly because of the new numbers coming in, and obviously we're constantly refining it. And these are all the latest numbers that Brandon gave us. And the page that everyone wants is the following page.
David, before you go on, I just have a question for Laura real quick. Option A, where we get everything on there, you have artificial turfs is the last entry line. And that's artificial turf for all the fields, or is that artificial turf so that we have a artificial turf on a championship softball field, a championship Little League field, a championship whatever field? Which is it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, actually these are for 5 artificially turfed pre-lined soccer fields.
Soccer fields.
So it would be the 2 on Domingo Paez,
Okay.
and this project would also include 8-foot fence, security fencing around it so that we could secure and protect our investment. It also would include 2 water cannons to cool it off on a hot day very quickly. So if we're having a tournament on there, they're still playable.
I want to train on the water cannon. That's my thing.
I'm with you, Mr. Mayor. I'm with you. And then it's also the 3 soccer fields on Sear. And what's wonderful about the pre-lined fields is it saves us a lot of money in staff time and the paint materials that go on there.
And what this then doesn't look at is any future location where we may want to have a tournament center type thing where we have maybe 4 fields back to back or side to side.
Well, what's great about the Domingo Paez complex is that we own the land down there.
Well, I know
so
we
as
own the
we
land.
want to expand, yeah, it would be.
So, but it doesn't cover any future expansion is my question.
No, it does not.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So basically, the summary page here is where we want to go. For the current fiscal year, we basically have $3.2 million of budgeted MPC debt. The coverage ratio, based on the budget, is 9.29 times. Now, I've included in here, obviously, the bond issuance costs. You see they are not linear because there are some fixed costs for bond issues than the other. And you've got 2 options. You've got, as I said, you have a 15-year option and a 20-year option. You have the average annual debt service. On a bond, the debt service is never level because of interest and terms and stuff. And then you've got the coverage ratio, that debt level, we would end up including the new debt into that. And then you'll see down below, the important to note is, for instance, under option A, 15 years, 1.2 million a year. That does not take into account the guaranteed energy savings of $211,000 below that. So that $211,000 could be netted off if it's from the right fund. Fund savings must be in the fund that the savings occurs in. So if there's electricity savings at the sewer plant, that savings stays in the sewer fund, not going to her for the general fund. Yes,
But
ma'am.
that 15.1.2, that's just for the basically the 15 million bond,
Yes.
right? Not for the
Correct.
others that aren't included on it.
Right.
Thank you.
So those are actual dollar savings. That's not
Those
just
are the guaranteed. When I talked to Brandon this morning, it was 90% of the item on the Victoria slide is our guaranteed saving. So that's where these figures came from. Yes.
And if we don't know, I can look it up once I get home. The two bonds dropping off, what's the approximate figure, figure annually?
Well, there'll be about the 3.3 million for next year,
Okay.
and then
What the debt service will be.
it'll
that'll
drop
be-
to $1 million something the following year, and then it'll go off.
Okay. Thank you,
So
sir.
in 2 to 3 years, there'll be $3.3 million of savings.
And the cash flow increase from the bonds coming off.
Okay.
Well,
And then
no,
what's-
I'm asking him.
Oh.
Yeah, the cash flow will stay in, it will be in the capital improvements fund to do with however council.
Will
needs.
improve by how much when the bonds get paid off?
Well,
That's the question.
Yeah.
About 2 million.
yeah, 2 million in
Wow.
2 years, and then 3.2 million in 3 years.
So
And that's,
this-
that's something I looked at in the budget. I looked at this year's budget and the cost and the debt. And I looked at that today. And I will tell you, when you look at this year's budget, last year's budget, previous 5 years' budget, we have been in a greater debt, total debt, than the option A in the past, and been able to pay that off during a very bad economic time.
Roger.
So, in my mind, is it a risk? Yes. Is it affordable? Is it something we can do? And is it something we should do for the community? I think so. But again, I would encourage everybody to go back and dig out last year's budget, look at those numbers, good questions, and the question is, how much debt do we feel we can tolerate? Because it's going to be paid off. And it's going to be paid off while we're doing all the other things we're doing, and recreation is usually one of the last things we do. I think at this time we probably can afford to do it.
And I think too, Mayor, to add to that, if you look at the, guaranteed energy savings that's lopped off.
That's a
the
plus.
top, that's a big plus. And also a number of the items and projects in there would be separate projects that would need to be budgeted for at some point in the process as we're able to do them. Here, you're knocking them all out, so you should see some cash flow improvement from that going forward too. It'll just be, instead of a separately budgeted for project, it will be included in this and in the debt service for that. And the other point I want to make about all this, and kudos to Schneider and Brandon's crew there, the amount of work it took to get that little document put together there would, I'd hate to even ask Sharon how much time it would take for her staff to try and put that together, with the resources that Schneider was able to bring to the table here. Obviously it was a partnership, but if we had to ask our staff to do it, plus procurement and everybody else involved, it would be an overwhelming job to do all this that they were able to do over the last 6-8 months.
Yeah, so we want to thank Schneider for being here and partnering with us. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
one
ma'am.
additional point is we only included the guaranteed energy savings on here. That's the amount that we know is guaranteed. We know that there will be additional savings in operations. We know that there will be additional revenue generated. Since we don't know what those numbers are, we didn't include that. So there would be additional money saved and earned on top of the number on this paper.
But, we're going to recommend the full amount, Mayor, because I think, if you look at the numbers that they've and showed, and also what the interest rates are going to be on these bonds, it's an excellent time to go into the bond market. And I really believe that even though we will be taking a little bit of risk, it's an opportunity for this council to make a lasting impact on the community for the next 15, 20 years.
Are we looking at option, the 15 or the 20 years of,
Well, I think we can afford.
looking at
I think we can afford either. And the question is, which is going to cost us less money?
Yeah.
and, go ahead.
Well, and to answer your question, most of these projects are, designed to go 20, 25 years. We usually try to match the life cycle of a project with the financing. 15 years, obviously, is a little bit more attractive because it guarantees everything will be paid for. The interest rates are usually a little lower on 15 versus 20. The decision point will be, what will the cash flow do in this capital improvements fund from doing 15 versus 20. We just talked about, a major competitor for those funds, street maintenance. So those are the kinds of things we have to balance out. And what I'll ask David to do is to try and cash flow out, these options into our cash flow analysis that we can show to you, and then maybe put in some other what-if scenarios on street maintenance or other projects to see how that money is going to flow over the next 10, 15 years.
And for the really geeky side, the following items are just what you would see in a prospectus. These are the interest rates from last week, AA rated plus 15 basis points as the FA recommended. So you can see the actual interest payment difference if we took them both to term. So for instance, option A is over $1 million of variance in interest. We, of course, as we do with all bonds, would put a call date in there with 10, 11, 12 years, depending on whether there's premiums or not. But we've always put call dates on the bonds, so we have the right to call them about halfway through the term, usually after 10 years. So a 15-year bond with a call at 10, 20-year period.
Call means we can
call them all in, and they're done. They're off the book.
Refinance or pay them off early.
Or prepay them off completely, and then there's no more interest.
We have not done a bond issue for quite some time because of the economic conditions. But if we hadn't taken the steps to watch the budget over these last 10 years, try to hold down spending, refinance the bonds that we have, and keep our debt levels low, we wouldn't be in the position to do this. So a lot of work over the last long period of time has really put us in a position to take advantage of the current situation. So.
Can you help me understand how this fits into the budget cycle as far as if we decide to press forward, how does that kind of fit into next year's budget cycle?
Well, Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
This fits into the budget cycle because since we issue bonds to do all of these projects, it's a net basically zero. We'll have additional debt service, but you have budget $15 million worth of bond issuance and $15 million for all these projects combined, obviously broken out. So in the budget process, the only extra revenue needed would be to cover the first year's debt service because we would have a debt payment due January 1, 2020.
Would we vote on it during that?
Yeah,
Yes.
it would be part of the budget process. So we vote on it.
Debt service is one of the things we go into detail through the budget process, just like revenue and what's the other two?
Personnel and
Operations.
And you will have to vote on the actual bond issue. We'll have an NBC meeting which will vote on the issuance of the bonds, and then you'll have a meeting to direct the NBC to issue the bonds as well.
Yeah, you have two levels of approval: the actual issuance of the bonds, and then the budget approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Go ahead. If we start, and I'm just trying to look at these figures, then when would we start seeing the projects start to come together? Is that right where it'd be about April of 19?
What we do is, depending on when council approves and when we go, we can issue. We do have cash reserves that we could cover until we issue. We just have to do another reimbursement resolution. But We do have some leeway in the current year budget. For instance, we budgeted Fry North Garden, and that project's not going, so there's about $2 million there that could be shifted to cover the starting of some projects this year. Laura does have a grant in the current year of $600,000 for the current lighting project. The new one, since the scope is greatly expanded from what it was, is more, but there's a chunk that we could get started this fiscal year, timing it so that those contracts continue in the new fiscal year when it could be within the budget.
Is that what number 6 is? Construction, May 19th to February?
Yes.
I don't see where it is in here, and I remember being concerned about the turf having to be replaced 12 years into the life of the loan. But then I asked Chuck right before the meeting, it turns out it wouldn't be the entire amount, it would only be that top portion.
Yeah.
So
turf is more than just
that makes
the
me
green
feel
grass you see.
I don't know what that second amount is, but also
About $2 million.
Well,
okay.
and you bring up a good point, Carolyn, because when I was talking to her about it, you know, we know there's going to be a life cycle end here, you know, be it 15, 20, 25 years out, and what we need to do is depreciate and have a sinking fund put together annually that can cover replacements as they occur then as we go along, so that we're not in this boat where we have all these deferred maintenance projects that you can't get to. This is a great way to make up for a lot of lost ground that we experienced over the last 10 years.
And then, sorry, one more thing. Laura said that it would include the fence and the water cannons, but it's listed under additional options on here, the fence, and it says 10-foot fence, not 8-foot.
Even better.
But I'm starting to,
As long as we don't put concertina on top of it.
It's, okay. And so does that mean it'll be significantly more money if the way it's listed, additional option, or maybe I should be asking you, the way it's listed in here,
Yeah,
does that mean?
Thank you, Councilman. That is included, and that might be listed incorrectly in there when additional options. That's in addition to the turf. Those are the options that we've included in that price. So the price that you see on there is the price for
That's included.
all of that.
It's not like a surprise cost.
No,
Like, hey,
yeah.
upgrade. Okay.
That's all included.
Okay,
It's not
cool.
like a model home. Do I get to ask my question now?
Yes, ma'am,
Thank
please.
you.
I've been waiting on pens and needles.
Yes, me too. So my question is on option A, I agree that if we're going to do it, we should just do everything. My question is about the wave machine at the Cove, which I knew was going to come up. So I just need some explanation on why that was included. I feel like that actually adds more to electric costs because we're not currently running it. So what is the reasoning for the wave machine?
Nora, you
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate that. I was kind of anticipating that you were going to ask some things, so I brought a little bit of data to share because I'm a data-driven person. I would never want to recommend something for our community that it really wasn't showing a necessity or that it would have some kind of a benefit. And what I was noticing is since the wave machine went away, necessity is the mother of invention. The way that we utilize the Cove has really changed. We've gone into more classes, more swim lessons, those types of things. While we have seen a dramatic decrease in open swim passes and open swim just general admission, we've lost 10,000 open swim general admissions over the past 2 years. In addition to that, our open passes, in 2016, we were making $104,000 in revenue. We made $62,000 in fiscal year 2018. But what's interesting about these trends is it's showing me that we're running a very lean program, we've decreased our staffing. We're using MINS. We're learning how to do minimal staffing, not overstaffing in areas, and then really tracking on a monthly basis to see what we're doing. So right now we are covering our goals for the Cove. We're on track to exceed them by a cost recovery of about 66% is what we're projecting this year. With all the other economic development efforts and all of the other sweet, pool turf fields to where we can start having tournaments, and we're already having those tournaments. The feedback from those tournaments, especially our softball state, was very positive for the Cove. They were asking about, you know, does it have a wave machine? It was a beachfront entry. So I really started digging into these numbers, and I think that's a really cool attraction to supplement all of the other efforts that we're making. The most surprising thing that I found is that the YMCA in Tucson actually used to bus people down here to utilize the wave machine, and it completely stopped after 2016. So
in 2016 is when that's
correct.
when it quit working and we didn't
Yes,
replace
ma'am.
it, right? Okay, thank you.
And so, you know, it just seemed like the right time to make that. I think we're in a great place to where we can make something really special from it.
Yeah, it's more a revenue case than it is a cost case.
Right, and so how long, so we're projecting 497,000, right? How long do those last? Wave machines, how long did this last one?
Well, again, it gets back to that sinking fund. We need to be able to say, here's the obsolescence, and we need to have the money available at the time it breaks down or can't be repaired to be able to fix it. And that gets back to Chuck's point about all those
I
plans.
think also it says in here that the last one was oversized for us, and that might have been why it had a shorter lifespan than it should have.
Could have been Laura.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the warranty provisions in there, I believe were...
WaveTech has stayed 20 years on that.
20?
Yes, the last one lasted approximately 15,
16 years.
Yeah, and to your point, Councilmember Umbry, yeah, this would right-size the unit.
Have we had feedback, Laura, from the citizens? I do not consistently hang out with people with children, as anyone that knows me knows. But people that do, I mean, some of the things I did hear back in 2016 were because of their small children, there were some concerns. I haven't heard anything else about that. So are we hearing feedback from people about how they feel about this, or?
Mayor Pro Tem Gray, we constantly get feedback about people's opinions of the Cove.
Yes, good and bad. I know.
Some people are saying they're devastated over the loss of the wave machine. Other people are saying that they wish we would just do lap swim all day long and never bring it back. That tells me that offering a wide range of options for that amazing facility, it would be the right way to go.
And I can agree with that.
Yes,
yeah.
thank you, ma'am.
And maybe now having the right size machine, it won't be. I remember when it would turn on, it was too intense for my little one. We'd have to evacuate. But maybe with the proper machine, it wouldn't be so scary.
And you still have the option of taking the youngest to the kiddie pool, which is not part of the wave
Yes,
action.
which is where I'd prefer to be anyway.
There you go.
As a mom with older kids, that we're at the Cove at a minimum twice a week because I have a swimmer in my family, that I could say that my kids don't ask to be taken to the Cove to hang out. I mean, we're already there twice a week at a minimum anyways because we were there for practice, but yeah, that they used to beg to be taken there for on the weekends or
Sure.
in the, to hang out or like.
It's an attraction.
And they don't anymore.
Do you think that's what the wave pool?
Ma'am.
Another comment along the lines of the wave machine, and not so much the wave machine as the pool. Is the possibility of tournaments and stuff available to us at that pool? Swim meets is what I'm talking about.
Councilmember Calhoun, yes, absolutely. The city also has a swim team now. That was one of the needs that the staff had identified for more swim team activities. And we're looking for tournament locations for every type of sport and athletic, having all kinds of events surrounding that. So yes, we've even thrown around ideas of RC boat racing in the diving well. I mean,
Councilman Calhoun, it was sized Great Lanes to attract swim meets.
Exactly.
Specifically to attract swim meets.
Okay.
Because the original plan was going to be a 6-lane pool, but in discussions and then with the school district also suggesting to make it 8 lanes to accommodate regional swim meets.
Wow.
That's the council at the time.
And we're veering a little bit off topic here. I appreciate you sharing the information, but we were talking about financing options. Do we have anything else on financing options? Okay. Thank you, David. Appreciate the report. And on my schedule, we have the number 2D which is the executive council report, the council executive report. Chuck.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, just a couple things from my end first, and then we can open up for questions. Mayor Pro Tem Gray and I will be going to Washington Sunday, so we'll be there through Thursday, and we'll be concentrating on the Department of Interior on Monday, Pentagon on Tuesday, and then we'll be on the Hill on Wednesday. So in Interior, I want to spend time talking about the adjudication and spending some time with BLM primarily. So that'll be the main focus there. Obviously, advocating on behalf of what you did at the Pentagon on Tuesday, and then combination of the above with the congressional delegation. So that'll be coming up. Got a number of things going on. It's a busy time of year between budget and those kind of things. CCOM made some personnel changes there. Commander Heiser and Commander Ferris from the Sheriff's Office are managing the facility right now, and I think doing a very good job. So that's moving along. And other than that, have heard nothing new on the court situation from the county that you've been reading about in the paper. So we'll be working, and I've discussed with Mr. Gilligan updating the court agreement, and we hope to have that to you here pretty soon. So Victoria will be working on that. So refuse, Sharon's putting together the plan for the drop-off, recycling facilities. We hope to have at least 2 locations for that, security being the primary concern. If you probably read in the news, Tucson is now finally coming to grips with their recycling issue, and they're losing millions, so at least we don't have that problem to deal with. So I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve on that. So with that, I have the department heads here, and feel free to ask us any questions you may have.
We have our economic luncheon.
It's on the 5th.
On the 5th, so Chuck will be coming back.
Flying back on the 4th. And
so he's going to be busy. So questions for Chuck?
Oh, one other thing. It looks like I didn't escape testifying in the adjudication trial. I'll now be testifying on May 13th. So I will be going to Phoenix for that. So.
Questions for Chuck on the report? They're going to be easy on you today, Chuck. Okay, we'll go to item E. It's a report on recent trips, meetings, future meetings. And I will tell our folks that just got back from DC, I'm very eagerly looking to see your trip reports online so I can read them.
Mine's online.
All right. Eager
Mine
beaver.
is not yet, but we'll be.
Okay. Anybody else for trip reports, meetings, future meetings?
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, along with submitting it so everyone in this room could see, I put it online on my website and Facebook so the public can read pretty much what I turned in to us. And then I also had attended the the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. There was a big turnout of bus riders, the largest I've ever seen, and I've been attending these meetings before I was, Jamie was there, she knows. There was standing room only. They were all giving Mike Norman with Public Works feedback on the proposed route changes, and so they're going to be having a open house for the Vista Transit, and they're hoping people show up and see the changes, get more feedback before the public comment the following day. This is April 16th at the library, and I'm going to try to be there because they were hoping. There was a lot of expression from people that they wanted to talk to council directly. They don't feel like you mentioned earlier in the meeting, that people feel like we decided things without them, and somebody sitting right next to me is like, well, it doesn't matter what I say, you guys already decided. And I was, no, it's not decided. And so if anybody else wants to turn up to that, that'd be really good. It's from 12:30 to 6, so there's a lot of time to cover. I'm not going to be at the entire thing, but so maybe if we went in different shifts, at the Mona Bishop room.
Okay.
Can she talk about the general sense of what
Sure.
people were?
Oh, yeah. So, some reoccurring comments made were the 1 hour routes going to, the loops going to 1 hour instead of the, and.
Was that a negative?
Yes, because of people bringing up concerns about inadequate shelters if they get stuck. Like, they miss the bus by 5 minutes, they gotta wait an hour. Some of the places they'll have just a sign, they don't have a shelter at all. They'll be out baking in the sun, or there's a storm and they're just stuck in the rain with their groceries, and they're afraid that even with the insulated bags, getting home with all their perishables, that 1 hour loop isn't gonna be adequate for them to make it home in time. That was one concern. The other one was a big chunk, one of the routes that covers Avenida Cochise and Coronado, they're completely talking about eliminating. It also is the stop for Jennifer House. And those stops in the past have been low ridership, but in the last 6 months have doubled for whatever reason. And there was a lot of concern about, there wasn't anyone that used those stops, but there were people represent friends who they were like, my friend needs that stop, my family needs those stops. Those were two big ones that I can think of off the top of my head. There were,
Thank you.
but there were positive feedbacks too, like the extended hours, they were happy about that. The transfer point happening at Walmart, they were excited about that.
Was staff able to explain that the hour loops would actually be cut by having the ability to go, let's say, from Walmart to another route to get back within that time frame?
Right. Mike explained that for a couple of situations, but it didn't apply to everyone, I guess. So he did really well considering it. It's there was a lot of talking all at once, and he did good. And I think that's it.
All right. Anybody else?
Did you say future?
I sure did. We're on item E on your agenda.
I bring up from airport commission meeting this past week. They've been talking about this sign for a long time, and brought forward a prototype that has been submitted to community development. So I know that Sharon took that forward. So hopefully we'll see some movement there with the airport.
Yeah. Well, of course we're dependent on ADOT and.
Yeah, it would have to go does it meet sign regulations, and then does ADOT approve, because it's on an ADOT road, so they're gonna have some approval.
Yeah, ADOT's gonna have some input on that because with the speeds and the distraction and that kind of thing. So.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah.
So I guess we've already gone to board and commission updates too at the same time.
That's where we were. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to comment on several things related to commissions. One primarily is, and I mentioned this before, Mayor, that we didn't take ample time to go over our commission requests before we did our strategic planning. And I have a request from EAC that we at least address what they saw as their strategic planning and their recommendations to council, and we haven't done that yet, although this was submitted a while back. Several of the items were, so I want us to block out some time to really talk about these commission recommendations to council.
As has been stated by staff and myself several times, when we get the draft strategic plan, we will have opportunities to address specifically the recommendations or the requests from the council, from those in the strategic format, and we will discuss it to the length that the council needs to feel that they need to do. So that will be discussed. I think that's been said how many times, Chuck?
Well, I know Victoria has it included in the draft, and that's part of the plan to.
So we will have time to do that. Is what I'm trying to assure you.
Commission recommendations.
Because it's not just the EAC, we had Airport Commission, we've had other commissions
Yeah,
as well.
all of them.
And we need to go through one by one and say, you know, this is a good idea, and this is a strategic idea, or this is not a strategic idea, and we need to discuss that.
I don't think
one of the points that I would like to see, and we've discussed this before, is the idea about coming up with the idea of what really is the water standard that we need to use. I'm blanking on the name. Net zero for water.
Yeah.
And again, in my mind, I think that's a great proposal from the EAC, but it needs to be broken up in 3 parts. And the first part is their piece, which is basically to say, this is the real definition that we need to work with. And then from that point, we need to go back to the legal side and say, is this legally, as a city, can we do this? And what are the parameters? And then there's other things as well that we need to discuss. So that's a very important thing. But again, the first piece, if they can come up with a definition of that on water, that would help us long term. And I think that's a great thing. But that's just one example of a number of commissions that have brought things. But you're absolutely right. We owe the commissioners the feedback on, we've looked, we've discussed, we've agreed, we disagreed, or we need to adjust, or whatever it needs to be. And that will happen when we have this session that I just talked about.
So the request of the EAC for a definition of net zero, do you want that to move forward? Is that?
I think that's one thing we can probably already discuss as a council, and I think we can have a work session on that.
And I don't see an issue with the commissions discussing it anyway.
Yeah.
And bringing it to council.
But what I think what you're asking is, they've requested to work on it, and I think that's a good idea. But we need to talk about the scope and those type of things with them, and give them some guidance, and then let them go do the work.
So that would be a work session?
Well, yeah, that would be a work session.
Okay, and you have that as a work session?
So the draft strategic plan will be brought to you on April 9th at your work session. And you'll see the goals set by council, the suggested actions by staff, and then you'll see separately, here's what the commissions have recommended for council to review and determine if those are items that you want included in the strategic plan.
Okay, this is why I think I probably keep coming back with this.
It's
because
confusing.
before we set the goals, it seems to me, and I'm not doing this because I just want to keep going over and over it, but I guess I just don't have a full understanding, that it seems to me, if we got all these requests or these goals or suggestions from our commissions, that should have been a part of how we developed our strategic planning.
Well, and I think it was.
I don't think it was.
Okay, well then we have a fundamental disagreement.
We do, because
And it's part of it, but it's going to be included. What I'm telling you, it's going to be included in the process.
I get that.
And
I do get that.
It may not have been up front of the process,
Right, where,
which was, I think,
in
was
my
what you were
opinion,
looking
it
for.
should have been.
That's what you were looking for.
right. So, okay, I just, it's so easy to get bogged down once staff has come up with what they would like to see happen.
Well, that's why you need to stick to your guns, Greg.
Well,
that's what I like
I'll
about
be
you.
sticking to, but it just feels so backwards, and I get it. I don't want to just belabor it,
Well,
but
I think too, that, a number of the items that were suggested by the boards and commissions were not necessarily overarching goals, but were actions that would fit into various goal areas, so.
Or they may not have been actions, they may have been more budget items.
well, even that.
More things being
even
handled,
that.
like the airport sign or whatever, so that's an example.
I think it feels the right thing to have done all of that up front. That's just the way I see things. So at this point now, April 9th, we're going to receive the strategic plan as it's printed out with the suggestions of the draft, with the suggestions from staff on action steps for those, was it the 4 E's that we ended up with? So then we're going to take time to go over each one of our commissions and their suggestions and where does it plug in or not plug in. Where is it understood, yeah, this will go with the budget or blah, blah, blah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and you can review, you know, the actions that we developed underneath there, and you can decide to do them or not do them. So, and then what you decide upon and vote upon, that's how the budget will be built.
And take as many meetings as you need until you're satisfied with the final strategic plan.
So if I bring this part up again, you can read the minutes to me and remind me that we've covered it. Anybody else had anything?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Gwen. I appreciate you getting back to the chair.
I'm on it now.
Go ahead, Will.
I'll be succinct. Thank you. Parks and Rec Board, Commission. Last two sessions we met, we've been just discussing the Snyder project. I don't think I have to tell anybody which option they want to recommend. They're going to come speak before us. But we did have the Sierra Vista Veterans Memorial Improvement Foundation come talk to us about their ideas and their plans for the Veterans Memorial at Veterans Park. Okay. And the commission, after sitting down and talking to them, has requested that they come brief us as a council.
Yeah, and they've seen this before. But
right.
They need to come see the new council.
Right. So,
I'm sorry,
What's that about that?
is this that
It's
statue thing?
The redoing of the Veterans Memorial Park flagpole area.
flagpole area in Veterans Park.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so-
Yeah, we have seen that.
They're just taking the time to raise the money.
Roger. And then we're actually going to all the parks. What day are we going? I'm sorry, I forgot offhand.
It's in April.
April.
But I
I don't remember either.
I think it's the second Saturday of April.
That's what I believe. I'll send an email out that way. We're
Let everybody
covered.
know.
If you want to invite your commissions to come with us, just let me know, and that way we can get it. Maybe 2 vans instead of 1, and that's all I have. Though. Thank you, sir.
And in April, 19th, we have something going on with. Tell me again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. April 18th from 5 to 7, we're opening the new sports division building, which is the old teen center.
Okay.
We're going to have a nice community little party there. We're going to be grilling up some hot dogs and have cake, and we'll do tours of the facility. The staff was working hard to make it look really pretty. That will be a fully staffed building.
And we're going to be able to show off the new ball fields, or the refurbished ball fields, I should say.
They're getting better. We still have some water issues over there, but they're coming around.
Okay, and that's a community event?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Anything else? Future discussion items, council requests? We've kind of hit that one too a little bit. Anything else, sir?
I just want to add, this Saturday, 0900 at the ball fields is the Little League opening ceremony. If people want to come out there and welcome them.
What time?
0900.
Well, everything is happening at 9 o'clock Saturday morning.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Chuck, anything? Okay, well, thank you guys for your indulgence. I think we had a great meeting today, a lot of good information. See you on Thursday.
Well,